The police have confirmed that in the past 2 months, 11 alleged drug mules have been arrested at the OR Tambo International Airport. The latest alleged drug trafficker arrested this past weekend is a 21-year-old South African female who was found with more than 110 drug bullets suspected to contain cocaine in her stomach. According to the Global Initiative's Global Organised Crime Index for 2023, South Africa has become a key player in the global cocaine trade, with a growing domestic market and connections to Europe, Hong Kong and Australia. This has yet again put a spotlight on South Africa being used as a transit for illicit drug trade, resulting in increased law enforcement vigilance at different ports of entry. Well, to talk more about the security and organised crime threats imposed by illicit drug markets in South Africa, we're joined by Chad Thomas, Organised Crime Investigator from IRS Forensic Investigations. Chad, good to have you. Thanks so much for weighing in on this conversation.
Morning, Leanne. Morning to the viewers.
This is frightening. I mean, police, of course, confirming that every week in the last month, officials have been intercepting alleged drug traffickers at OR Tambo International Airport, and a large amount of drugs have been seized. How rife is it? If these are the ones that are being caught, I hate to think that there are lots that are not being caught.
So it's a very interesting dynamic. Over the last few months, we've seen some massive drug busts at other ports of entry, in particular our seaports of entry on the west coast, where hundreds of kilograms of cocaine have been intercepted. And then, of course, coming across our land borders from Mozambique and Zimbabwe, we've seen a lot of heroin that has been intercepted. The use of mules has been around for a very long time, but we haven't seen it used as much of late. And we think it could be as a result of a number of factors. It could be because our seaports are now being heavily monitored based on the successful disruptive and dismantling operations that took place together with our local law enforcement, crime intelligence, and their foreign counterparts, that they now need to find another way to move quantity into South Africa. But what we find with human intelligence is that a lot of these busts are reliant on informers. These informers may also have a secondary agenda. They may give information out about mules that are carrying product so that all attention is focused on those particular mules, and mules that are carrying in a larger consignment or consignments that are coming in packaged in other ways and not necessarily carried by mules go unnoticed because all of the attention has been focused on these particular mules. So I'm always very interested to find out the background to why we're seeing this increase. Is it a distraction, or is it because our intelligence has reached a point where they've got actionable information coming through from their sources? I'm hoping that it's the latter, because we have seen an increase in these type of disruptive and dismantling operations, and crime intelligence has taken a lead together with their international counterparts in trying to dismantle these international syndicates using South Africa as a transnational point.
Yeah, and that's an interesting and a worrying perspective, if the fact that there's a lot more happening, and that this is just a ploy for others to get away with the bigger kinds of moving into the country. I mean, this latest drug trafficker arrested this past weekend, we're talking about a 21-year-old South African female released more than 110 drug bullets were found in her stomach. This is obviously suspected to be cocaine. I mean, what are we talking about when we're talking about 110 bullets? How many kilos would you say that is? And in the same answer, I beg your pardon, what could pressure a young girl like this to become involved in crime and risking her life like this?
It's a very sad indictment on the fact that we've got people who are willing to become mules. They're recruited by these criminal syndicates. They're taken across to Brazil primarily, where they train to swallow these bullets. These bullets are exceptionally dangerous. Although they try to package them as best as possible, they can break down in the stomach, and they can release the product, which could result in the person suffering an overdose and dying. We saw a marked increase in the use of human mules during the late 1990s. And then, of course, with the breakdown in law enforcement at our different ports of entry, we saw a marked increase in huge amounts of drugs coming across our borders, being repackaged and then sent to other countries in the world. You must remember South Africa, from a geographical perspective, has the West Coast, which allows for cocaine to come in from South America, and has the East Coast, which allows for heroin to come down from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, from Tanzania down to Maputo, and then on road into South Africa. And because of our international trade relations and because of our border infrastructure at our ports of entry, these products are broken down, repackaged, and sent to these other places. The fact that we're now seeing mules being used again, and a lot of mules, means that they are taking a huge risk, because people show signs that they perhaps are carrying illicit product. You would never be comfortable as an individual if you're being used as a mule. You'd be very uncomfortable with the fact that you may be caught out. You'd be showing certain body language, and you may even show signs of distress because of this amount of product that's literally packed into your body. So it's a huge risk taken by the drug syndicates. And as I pointed out earlier, we always have to be very careful when we see these amounts of mules being identified by our crime intelligence and the sources from which they're getting the information, because more often than not, it could be a distraction for other product that's coming in, but that goes unnoticed because all of the attention is focused on these particular mules.
Yeah, that's a great worry. Would you say South Africa is increasingly becoming a gateway for international drug smuggling? Is it getting worse?
It's a huge problem. We found drugs in South Africa destined for foreign markets, primarily Australia. We've seen that foreign law enforcement have now got boots on the ground in South Africa, working together with our state law enforcement agencies to infiltrate, dismantle, and disrupt these type of syndicates. And the quantities being moved are significant. And there was one very well-publicized case in Australia where a bulldozer arrived by ship from South Africa, and the entire bulldozer was filled with cocaine. Every single lining of that particular bulldozer was filled with cocaine. In a fruit export that took place, the fruit at the destination to be exported from South Africa was found to be full with cocaine. So we are a massive transshipment point. And of course, it's not just for cocaine, it's also for heroin. And we're also seeing a massive increase in the manufacture of methamphetamine in South Africa. And we saw that laboratory that was successfully dismantled in Limpopo very recently. We need to be concerned as well about the turf wars that are playing out with international crime syndicates in South Africa. A member of a gang in Cape Town that was meant to take receipt of an international shipment of cocaine claimed that the cocaine was lost at sea. The syndicate from South America actually sent soldiers to South Africa to fight this gang, to enforce their rights, to try and find out what had happened to their shipment. And this gang leader has now subsequently been kidnapped by a foreign drug syndicate operating on South African soil. So it's a very frightening dynamic, because one must remember a transnational organized crime syndicate cannot operate in South Africa without the assistance of a South African organized crime group. So they're partnering up with different groups, and these groups are fighting amongst one another to now take control of this lucrative transnational repackaging operation that's taking place in South Africa. And it's an exceptionally lucrative market.
And that's what's worrying, because, I mean, we've seen police seizing large consignments of drugs at OR Tambo International Airport and on numerous occasions. But the reality is that some airport staff are also being implicated and arrested for being in on this whole drug smuggling. But do we ever get to the head? That's the big question, because you've got these mules, you've got the security involved, but do we ever get to who's actually heading this up and the major crime bosses?
Yeah, that's a very good point you make. We always seem to get the people that we refer to as the foot soldiers. Those are the mules, they're the people that are receiving the packages, that are repackaging, but we don't necessarily get to find out who the heads of these syndicates are, who the top tier leadership is, and we don't see enough dismantling of the top tier leadership. However, I can tell you that if we look at the way crime intelligence has operated over the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen a vast improvement in the type of intelligence that they're receiving and the way in which they're acting. And that is a positive indictment on the South African law enforcement agencies and the way in which they've partnered with their international counterparts to be able to identify these syndicates. A lot of the information that's been received locally by our crime intelligence is as a result of the relationships that they've built up with their counterparts in foreign jurisdictions. And those territories are sharing active information with their South African counterparts, who in turn are able to set up these busts. But like I mentioned before, when one looks at the amount of drugs that have come into our ports of entry from a sea point perspective, it is massive amounts, far greater than all of those mules put together. So we need to concentrate on all of our ports of entry, not just our domestic carriers or people that are coming in from international flights, but we of course have to concentrate primarily on our major harbors.
Yeah, harbors. And what about, just very quickly, I mean, so many of our viewers have been speaking to our porous borders, you know, that are a major issue. It's no secret. And I can see that there is, you know, a lot of work being done. I know there's a wall between South Africa and Mozambique that's under construction, but our borders are infamous for being too porous. What do we know about that? How much is flowing through other means into the country?
So our land borders are a problem. Specifically from Zimbabwe, we're seeing a lot of explosives coming across the border. These explosives are used by local organized crime syndicates for ATM bombings, for CIT heists, and for use by zama-zamas in illegal mining. We've seen heroin coming across the border from Mozambique, and we also see vehicles exchange. So vehicles are going across the border from South Africa to Zim, from Zim to Zambia. We've seen vehicles going across to Mozambique, from Mozambique up to Tanzania. So these different crime syndicates have a symbiotic relationship. You may see that vehicles are being exchanged for illicit gold, it may be exchanged for illicit tobacco, it may be exchanged for explosives, it may even be exchanged for narcotics. So our land borders are a critical problem. Of late, last week, we heard that a lot of money is going across our borders illicitly. These are the proceeds of crime. So we're seeing a lot of rands and a lot of dollars going across the borders. So just like we need to concentrate on our sea borders in respect of large quantities of narcotics coming in, we have to concentrate on our land borders to ensure that these explosive type of issues, etc., aren't coming across. And of course, like we discussed today, we need to concentrate on our airports to try to stop the issue of mules.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you. Chad, thanks so much for talking to us. Chad Thomas, Organised Crime Investigator from IRS Forensic Investigations, talking to us about South Africa being used as a drug trafficking, transit and security threat created by organised drug crime groups in the country.